Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. So go ahead and put your questions in the comments now so that I can answer the question. But I have a good topic for you today. Let's talk about the medical, right? And the medical is required for when you're applying for a green card, the medical is going to be required. Whether you're in the United States or you're waiting for your interview outside of the United States, at some point in the process, your medical is going to be required. Now, when we talk about why it's very important now to know when to do the medical, is because they're waiving the interview for a lot of green cards. And that means that if you do the medical and they have the medical already, they're not sending a deficiency notice or a request for evidence for the medical. They're just going to go ahead, make a decision, and send the green card in the mail. So before, where you had to expect an interview, it didn't really matter whether you submitted it with the application packet with the medical, because guess what? By the time you got scheduled for the interview, you could just take the medical with you to the interview and all would be well, right? But now, if you submit the medical with everything else, all your applications included, it means that as long as you submit a solid petition and application, they don't have any further questions and they don't see a need for an interview, it means that they're not going to be sending you a request for evidence for that one thing that they're going to need. The reason that we want the request for evidence is because request for evidence means that it could be another 3 month delay. It could mean 3 to 6 months um, delay in getting the green card. So why not do it at the forefront and then possibly get your green card in the mail? Now, the another benefit here is that they have extended the application, the medical exam. So that means that the medical exam is no longer valid just for 1 year. It's valid now for more than a year, for 2 years. So you don't, all being well, you should be able to get your permanent residence within the 2 years after your medical is completed. So if you can, my advice would be, if you can, submit that medical, submit the medical with your petition. But then again, it depends on what type of petition you're applying for. For example, with my VAWA clients, remember that the VAWA process is 2 steps. So while you're applying for your green card at the same time that you're applying for VAWA, it doesn't mean that the entire process is going to take 2 years. So in that case, it may not make much sense to add the medical, because, for example, if they make a decision on the VAWA within 2 years, then that means that your medical would already expire and you'd have to do another medical for the green card leg of the process. So, if if your process is going to possibly take more than 2 years, then at that point, you shouldn't be doing the medical, or I wouldn't recommend. You can, but if you have money and time to burn, sure, you can submit it. It's not going to hurt to submit it at the forefront. But if your process is going to be more than 2 years, it's very, very likely that that medical is going to expire and you'll have to do another one. But if you want to, you don't mind the extra money, you don't mind the extra time, it doesn't hurt your process. So that's one consideration. Now, when we're talking about the medical, if your relative is outside or you're waiting for your green card from outside of the United States, it is just you can't do the medical before the interview is scheduled. So that's a given. The medical will be scheduled after you receive your interview notice. So if you're outside of the United States, um, you're going to do it when your interview is scheduled. However, if you're in the United States and your process is going to be less than 2 years, it is worth submitting the medical. Sometimes processing times change. But for example, right now, I've seen family based adjustment of status applications taking less than a year. And so in that case, sending the medical with everything else at the beginning of the process with all the applications and not waiting for a request for evidence is going to be best here, because they're trying to focus on speeding up processing times by waiving the interview. And so, by submitting that medical, it means that you could just skip all of that request for evidence, 3 months waiting to see what they're going to do, 3 months of them possibly just processing your medical. You can skip all of that. It can go before, they can evaluate whether you should get the green card. They'll see the medical and then make a decision right there and send your approval notice and your green card in the mail. So that's my advice. So just in summary, if your process is estimated to take less than 2 years, do the medical, include it in the packet. It's worth it. If it's over, your process is over, then unless you don't mind doing the medical again, then you can wait. You can wait until they contact you to get the medical. These now cases where it could take more than 2 years would be VAWA. Now, with VAWA, what happens is you first apply. When you apply for everything at one time. That means you're applying for your VAWA status to get protection from, deportation, that you can stay here on deferred action. And then right after your VAWA is approved, it moves directly into the green card process. The entire process usually takes about 2.5 years. So after it's approved, it jumps straight into the green card process. So unless processing times speed up, they are focusing on speeding up the processing times. For example, there have been lawsuits right now regarding processing times, and that sometimes has a positive impact on getting timelines and processing times moved up. So there are lawsuits now targeting, the long wait times and long processing times. And what we are seeing is we're seeing the USCIS taking certain action to get things faster, moving faster. For example, the USCIS, the Vermont Center Service Center, was the only service center that processes VAWA petitions. But now they have divided it into, because the processing times have gotten longer and longer, they have now designated a second office that will process VAWA petitions. So at this office, this division of labor could mean that we see the process go from 2.5 years to a year and a half instead, or even less, hopefully. And in that case, then my advice would change, and you would hear me say, send that medical with the rest of your documentation. So, for example, say you're doing the marriage-based petition. At the point that you're applying for a marriage-based adjustment of status, where you're in the United States, at that point, you would be able to include, I recommend you include your medical, because with a marriage-based, family-based, and even VAWA, they're waiving green card interviews right now. And so that once they are provided with everything at one time, you are able to then get the green card in the mail if they approve you for waiving the interview. Now, how do you know they'll waive the interview? You'll get the green card, you'll get the approval notice in the mail. But how do you increase your chances of getting that interview waived? You will need to make sure you submit a solid application, because what they're looking at is they're checking off the boxes to make sure you meet all the requirements. And so one not so great habit that I see when people are having problems in any process when it comes on to the USCIS and applying for an immigration benefit is people tend to apply for things and then they didn't submit everything that's necessary. And so they get requests for evidence, maybe even denials. They get a lot of problems in the process. And I do see this happening with the marriage base, where they just submit the marriage certificate, some pictures, and then they're like, oh, what the heck? I'll just wait for the interview to give them everything. But now that they're waiving the interview, do you really want to take that chance? Now that they're waiving the interview, you want to make sure that you put a solid application. Don't wait for that interview for them to be asking you for information. And when you're at the interview and they're now asking you for that, you're walking on thin ice, because if they're now at the interview asking you for things that can show them that they can approve you, if you mess up or you miss something, then you'll get a denial in the mail. And usually, when it gets to the point where you're at the interview and the officer is asking you for things, they're already a little skeptical about whether they can approve you in the first place. So keep that in mind. Now that we know that they're waiving interviews for certain green card applications, then use that as a motivator to make sure you submit a solid application. And a part of that, of course, a thing that makes a big difference is to be represented. Representation matters. All right. So now that I've said my piece about the medical and whether you should send it, now I'm going to go on to your questions. Feel free to go ahead and put your questions in the comments, and I will answer as those come in. Your questions can be anything that's immigration related. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Facebook. I'm on, now I'm on Twitch. So I'm streaming live on Twitch, by the way. So I am on multiple platforms and I'm on Instagram. So go ahead, put your questions in the comments. I'm monitoring all the comments here and I will answer your questions as they come in. Thank you for the way. I really appreciate that. Now, let me see. So I'm just through to your question. So hang tight as I get to your questions. What if you didn't submit your medical? I've received my work permit. I filed for adjustment of status. So if you didn't submit your medical, it's fine. Don't panic. What they will do is they're going to send you a deficiency notice. So at some point in the process, just letting you know that they don't have your medical. And then is they will tell you you can bring it to the interview if the interview is scheduled, or if or they'll send a request for evidence if they're going to waive the interview. So the good news is that if they are going to waive the interview, they'll give you a heads up by sending you that notice, that request for evidence for your medical. The downside of this though is that even though they're going to waive the interview, when you have to go ahead and send your medical in, you can expect at least another 3 months before you get a response or get your permanent residence approved. Uh, I'm in process of getting my green card. I get my work permit on Social Security. If I want to add my kids on it now, would it slow down my processing time? So it depends on what type of application, what kind of green card petition you're applying for. My I-130 is approved. How can I get help to do my permanent residence? Go ahead and call the office. We are here to assist you. Now, your I-130 is approved. It depends on where you are. If you're outside of the United States, then you're going to be waiting for your information to be sent to the NVC. Once it gets to the NVC, they're going to process your additional applications to get you to the point where you attend the interview at the embassy. Now, if you're in the United States and you just got notice of an approved I-130, it's going to depend on who is sponsoring you. If it's going to be a spouse, a U.S. citizen, or legal permanent resident spouse, then you could possibly qualify for adjustment of status. Um, Now, mental status, and it depends on your status. So there are a number of follow-up questions here. I can do an entire live on this issue because even though you have an approved I-130, the next thing I need to know is who is your relative that's sponsoring you, or is it an employee? Well, an I-130 would be a family member. So which family member is it? Is it a parent? Is it a spouse? Is it a child? And what is the immigration status of the child? Are they a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident? And then what is your current immigration status? Did you end up overstaying, or do you have current status? And when does your status expire? So as you can see, in order to give you the right information and to assist you further, we will need to know all of that information. You can go ahead, call the number that's going across the screen on YouTube right now, YouTube, on Facebook and Twitch. Go ahead, call that number, or if you look at the description, so that the text in the description of the video, you'll see the link to schedule your appointment. So I see my son, he is born here and he's 22. Okay, so you are the immediate relative of a US citizen. So now that you have an approved I-130, the next step is to apply for adjustment of status. That's going to involve now filing the I-485 with the affidavit of support. Now, you need help, go ahead, give me a call. I can definitely help you through the rest of that process. All right. Um, okay. Keep putting those questions in the comments. I'm through your questions now. So put those questions in the comments. I-130 taking so long for people outside of the US. I agree. That is the unfair part. It's taking about 9 to 12 months to get the I-130 approved. And then it on which country you are, it's taking another year or over a year just to get in with the interview after you tackle or get through the whole ordeal with the National Visa Center. So there are complex steps involved in getting to the point of the interview, even after an approved I-130. Now, another thing, Francine, that I would like to mention here, since we're talking about this, is what's your current status? Now, you are the parent of a US citizen, but another very important question here is, did you overstay your visa, or did you cross the border without inspection? Because that's also going to determine whether you need to apply for a waiver called an I-601. If you apply for a waiver, you need a waiver, or whether you can go forward with the adjustment of status. So that's another thing here that I want to mention, is that whether you qualify, you have an approved I-130, you're here in the United States, but whether you qualify for adjustment of status is also very dependent on how you enter the United States. But keep in mind, how you qualify is going to depend on your particular circumstances. So that's where the consultation is very important. I want to go through the Mexico border from Jamaica. What do I need? So, that is something that is right now, it's one of those things I would definitely not advise here on the live. And just because there's no good way, unless you're coming in with a visa, you're coming in legally, there's no that your trip is going to be successful. Right now, there's a lot of new policies that are brewing. The Biden administration, they are thinking about detaining individuals at the border now. So um, instead of processing you at the border and then releasing, right, as long as there are no risk factors and you do qualify, they are now talking about detaining immigrants who are coming in. And then another thing is, if you are going to go through the border and you're going to skip the border patrol, you're going to skip the individuals who are going to inspect you at the border, and you're going to try to sneak across, limit your ability to apply for asylum. That's a new policy that they're also looking at implementing. So they are, when it comes on to crossing into the United States from the Mexico border, it's a very controversial topic, and it can get very tricky. Now, keep in mind that I do understand that people have to leave and try to enter the United States for safety by seeking asylum at the border. And so, by all means, if you need to flee for your life and you need to come to find a safe haven, and that safe haven is going to be in the United States at the border, then certainly, that's where you would have to go. However, it's not, and not everyone that's coming to the border is going to get in, and not everyone that comes in is going to be released. You could end up being detained, and they are now looking at policies of detaining immigrants for longer periods of time, which would mean that you would end up being locked up. It's very much being detained, very much like being in a prison-like conditions. It's not just, I don't agree with it, but that those are the conditions under which you could possibly be living if you do come to the border and you don't qualify for parole to be paroled in, or if they don't find, if they are going to process you through an immigration court and keep you detained during that time, then it's not going to go as you expect. So I wouldn't be able to tell you how to do that, but if you, by all means, if you need to flee and get to a safe place, then who am I to tell you not to do it? How long do the I-130s take? And can I submit a work permit as well? No. So that is a loaded question, right? So what I-130s are taking anywhere from 9 to 12 months. You applying for an I-130 only, you can't submit a work permit. If you're going through the adjustment of status process, then you can apply for a work permit at the same time. But whether you qualify for the adjustment of status, and if you're in the United States, it's going to be a whole new matter. That's where the consultation is very important to determine whether you qualify and then to move forward and help you to get it done. I'm in the US, my kids outside, it slowed down. Would it slow down my processing time to add them on my case? Go ahead and schedule a consultation, because whether or not it's going to slow down your case, can you even add your children, right? What kind of process are you going through? Not every single process allows you to add your children. Some of them require you to first get the green card and then apply for your children. If you're the immediate relative of a US citizen, then they will not allow you to add your children. If you are here and your children are in another country, then at that point, and they do allow relatives to be added, then they're going to be processed. So once your petition is approved, they are going to be processed as long as they're added to the application. Can you travel after you do your citizenship interview? So keep in mind, you do travel, you have to make them know. And because you haven't been approved for citizenship. So if you haven't been approved yet and you want to travel, just make sure that that travel isn't going to affect your continuous residence and your physical presence in the United States. Those are two elements that you have to prove when you're applying for citizenship. And the idea of this is that you not spend more than 6 months outside of the United States, that you can show that you've had continuous residence for at least 4.5 years of the past 5 years. If you're married to a citizen, then it's going to be 2.5 years, or that you've had at least 2.5 years of physical in the United States. If it's based on your 5 years of being a permanent resident, if it's based on your 3 years as a permanent resident, then you're looking at a year and a half of being a physical present. So as you can see, it's not as simple as just saying, sure, I'm a continuous resident, and sure, I've had physical presence. I'm physically here right now. It's not as simple as that. There is some you do have to add up that those travel dates to make sure that you comply with those requirements. And if traveling outside of the United States is going to mess with that, then you have to be careful about that. Keep in mind too that once they approve your citizenship and you do travel, you have to update them when you're going to be sworn in. They give you a sheet, a form where you have to fill in anything new that has happened, and you would have to update them. Does applying for the green card via U.S. resident spouse take longer if you're based in the US or in Jamaica? So right now it's on the same timeline as the spouse of a U.S. citizen. Now, for both U.S. citizens and residents who are rightfully applying for their spouses, you have to make sure that your spouse meets all the requirements. But residents and citizens who are sponsoring their spouse in the United States through adjustment of status are seeing a faster processing time. Unfortunately, the embassies are backed up, and because of that, we're seeing a wait time from between into 24 months and sometimes even longer if there are delays as a result of mistakes or errors or things of that nature. Getting documents prepared, getting fees prepared, it can take longer. So um, being outside of the United States is taking longer than being in the United States. And then the benefit of being in the United States while you're applying, given granted you do qualify, is that you get to have a head start on your life here in the United States. You get your social security, you get your work permit, you get to live with your relative or your spouse and your children, if your children are here as well, and you all get to do that while you wait for your process to be completed in the US. So that's the upside of being in the US. So even though in some cases you may experience a longer wait time than usual, so say it's not 5 months that your process is in the US that your process is continues for, but say it's a year, at least you're here in the US and you're still able to move forward with working and being with your relatives. All right. I already submitted my I-130 petition. Can I still submit my medical and other information prior to their decision? So one reason why they send that deficiency notice is because if you send the medical without a request for evidence, it can get lost. So you don't want to be taking that risk. And they will likely ask for it if they need it right away. The medical, they'll let you know. Now, if you submitted your I-130 petition, um, then the I-130 petition does not require the medical, right? What requires the medical is the adjustment of status application. And that's usually when they're in the final phases of giving you the green card. So just keep that in mind. There is a difference here. The I-130 petition is not what gets you the, it is what shows that you qualify through a relative. What gets you the green card when you're here in the US is the adjustment of status application. When you're outside of the United States, the approved petition is sent to the embassy, and then they do the interview and they look over your immigrant visa now to determine whether you qualify for the immigrant visa that's going to get you to the United States to give you the green card. So just keep in mind the I-130 does not give you the green card. Can I do adjustment of status filing for a child over 21? So usually when I get this question, there are a number of considerations. The first is if the child over 21 is out of status, then it is unlikely that they'll qualify for adjustment of status unless they're applying for VAWA. But if you are filing, that means that they're not filing for VAWA, they're filing through the relative. And if they're out of status, being over 21, adjustment of status is not going to be the process that they have to go through. It's likely going to be what's called the I-601A waiver. That's going to help them to get to the green card. It's not going to help them to stay in the US though to finish out the green card process. So I can do a whole live just based on that. I got my I-130 approved yesterday. I'm going to get I-485 approved soon. They sent notice of intent to deny because of my medicals, and I sent it yesterday. So I wouldn't know. I don't know your case, but I would have to evaluate a notice of intent to deny to see what's going on there, to see if it's only the medical that's required. Keep those questions coming. Okay, so my adjustment of status approval, green card, I'm waiting on. So I would love to add my kids, them on it would be a problem. So if your kids are outside of the United States and you're going through adjustment of status, your kids would have to be processed in the country outside of the United States. So they're not going to be added to your adjustment of status application. They have to go through their own process. And then again, in order to answer this accurately, I have to know who's sponsoring you. What process are you going through? What's your current immigration status? And whether the kids even qualify to be sponsored by you or the petitioner. All right, keep those. Hi there, Jamon. It's nice to see you. My husband's NVC approve. I'm waiting for interview. Can I put expedite because I'm pregnant? I need my husband. Can I do it or not? So keep in mind that the information I'm giving you is general information. I cannot tell you should not be taking any action on the information I'm giving you because this is a live show and I'm not your attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice. I'm providing you general information. An expedite request is something that can always be submitted as long as you do have the evidence to justify the expedite request. So in your case where you are expecting a baby, of course, that is something that would support a valid request for to expedite the case. Especially if you are currently going through, additional stress related to the pregnancy, and you can sufficiently state this to them, then certainly can it can justify an expedite request. Whether it's going to be approved, that's up to them. All right. So now I'm going to tell you how to get in touch with me so I can help you. Go ahead and go to the link in the profile. The link in the profile is going to take you to the website. You will have a link where you can schedule your own appointment. Go ahead and use those links to schedule your own appointment. It's very easy. You just go through a form and confirm your appointment. And you can also call on the website. There's a phone number, there's an online chat, there's the information form, contact form. All three lead to the scheduling coordinators who will be more than happy to assist you. Go ahead if you need assistance, you'd want representation, go ahead and schedule so we can get started on your case right away. All right, so you submitted a no objection. So now, if you submitted a no objection, is it to the embassy? So if it's to your own country to get the no objection letter, then I would not have the information about how long the country would take to process it. If you did submit the no objection letter here, once you got your no objection letter, now you're applying for the waiver. you could be looking at anywhere from a few months to up to a year to get that waiver approved, if it's going to be approved. The notice of intent was only for the I-693 medicals. I'm asking if my I-485 will be approved soon. So I wouldn't know. I'm not your attorney and I don't know your case. I wouldn't be able to tell you if it's going to be approved soon. What I would say generally is once you respond to anything like an RFE or notice of intent, it could be anywhere from 3 to 4 months before you do get a response. Could be sooner, and sometimes even could be longer. But I've seen about 3 to 4 months to be able to get an answer on that response. Okay, so yes to your own country. So you'll have to check with your country to see what their processing is and how long you can expect them to take to evaluate your request and then give you your letter should they agree to give you the letter. All right. Thanks everyone for your time. I appreciate it. I'm going to be back tomorrow as usual at lunchtime to be able to answer questions, and I'll also bring a good topic for you to talk about. Go ahead and mark your calendar tomorrow at around lunchtime. Also, keep in mind that if you want to go ahead and speak with me about your particular matter, the consultation is where you're going to have to do that. That's where I evaluate, make sure that you qualify, and then we get started right away. The medical is valid for 2 years. So 2 years, so they have extended the validity of the medical, and that's why it is possible. It's worth it to submit the medical at the forefront because as long as the process is expected to be less than 2 years. All right, have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.